Flashing red and blue lights lit up my carefully trimmed lawn as 3 police cruisers blocked my driveway. Officers moved briskly between conversations with my impeccably dressed guests, who stood calm and composed despite the unfolding commotion. Among the onlookers was Karen Whitfield, our ever-watchful HOA president. She stood on the sidewalk with her arms folded and that smug, self-satisfied grin she reserved for moments like these, when she thought she'd finally caught me breaking one of her countless neighborhood rules. But then, a voice came crackling over the lead officer's radio, and the words that followed shifted everything. Be advised, those individuals are diplomatic guests cleared by the State Department. Repeat, they have full diplomatic clearance. I watched Karen's expression implode, her smugness vanishing like a sandcastle swept away by a crashing wave. Let me backtrack. I'm Marcus Chen, and I've been a resident of Willowbrook Estate in Riverside, Connecticut for 5 years now. It's one of those storybook neighborhoods with colonial-style homes, pristine yards, and a homeowners association that operates more like a microgovernment. I work as a cultural liaison for a global nonprofit, a role that occasionally involves hosting international dignitaries. That particular weekend, I had the honor of welcoming 4 ambassadors as part of a local outreach initiative aimed at fostering grassroots diplomacy. They arrived Friday afternoon in 2 sleek, black SUVs with tinted windows. First out was Ambassador Kofi Mensah of Ghana, draped in a brilliant Kent cloth over a sharp suit. He was followed by Ambassador Elena Volkov of Estonia, Ambassador Carlos Mendoza of Peru, and Ambassador Rashid Al-Rashid of Jordan, each impeccably dressed in a way that blended formal wear with cultural flair. Over the next few days, they were scheduled to visit schools, cultural organizations, and attend a dinner at my home. I should have predicted that Karen would get involved. She's held the HOA presidency for 3 years now and treats her position like royalty. Just last month, she fined the Johnsons over a garden gnome that was allegedly half an inch taller than allowed. Before that, she attempted to cite Mrs. Rodriguez for a tiny wind chime that supposedly violated noise regulations. Karen's house is just 2 doors down from mine. Structurally, it's a carbon copy of mine, except hers is surrounded by surveillance cameras that wouldn't be out of place at a military base. Saturday began quietly. The ambassadors and I were enjoying coffee on my back patio, discussing upcoming school visits. Around 10 a.m., I noticed Karen's curtains flutter. By 10:30, she'd passed my house 3 times already, walking her small poodle, Princess, and pointing her phone in a way that suggested she was documenting something. Ambassador Mensah, ever the diplomat, asked with a wry smile whether we had paparazzi in the area. I explained Karen's tendencies and dismissed the moment. But she wasn't done. By midday, she stood at the edge of my yard, clipboard in hand, writing furiously. When Ambassador Al-Rashid stepped outside in his traditional attire, she bolted back to her home. Within the hour, I received a series of emails from the HOA. Violations, they claimed, too many vehicles, operating a business from a residence, hosting an unauthorized gathering. None were valid. I forwarded them to a legal friend, who confirmed they held no ground. Then things escalated. Around 2 p.m., as my guests reviewed presentations inside, I heard Karen speaking loudly outside. Yes, officer, there are strange foreign men coming and going from the house. Black SUVs. Unfamiliar clothing. Foreign languages. I think it might be human trafficking or worse. A chill ran through me. She had called the police. I quickly informed the ambassadors. Ambassador Volkov, with seasoned grace, suggested they present their diplomatic credentials and let the matter unfold. Ambassador Mendoza laughed lightly, noting it would make for an amusing chapter in his memoir. Their calmness in the face of such thinly veiled xenophobia stirred a mixture of pride and frustration in me. 15 minutes later, 2 patrol cars rolled in. I met the officers and explained the situation. They were courteous but made it clear they had to respond to the emergency call. Karen had elevated her complaint to a full 911 report, citing potential threats. My guests presented their credentials without hesitation, and the officers reviewed them diligently. That's when Karen made her most catastrophic move. She stormed into the scene, raising her voice and pointing fingers. These people don't belong here. Look at them. This is suspicious. Search their vehicles. Their documents are fake. I know fake when I see it. Sergeant Williams, the lead officer, attempted to de-escalate, But Karen was relentless. "I've been HOA president for years," she insisted. "I know every household here, and this is criminal." Sergeant Williams then made several phone calls, one after scanning the ambassador's documents. His demeanor began to shift. He stood straighter, grew quieter, more respectful. By the time he returned, his tone was ice cold. He said firmly to Karen. "These gentlemen are official diplomats protected under federal law. Your emergency call was not only baseless but potentially criminal." Karen's bravado faltered. "That's not possible. Marcus probably hired actors. Check again." But the investigation had already pivoted. Sergeant Williams called for backup, including a federal liaison. The situation quickly transformed. 2 more police vehicles arrived, along with an unmarked government car. Officers were no longer focused on my guests. They were now interested in Karen. When she attempted to retreat indoors, Sergeant Williams informed her she needed to remain for questioning. Meanwhile, the ambassadors, gracious as ever, agreed to provide statements regarding the incident, voicing concerns about discrimination and false reporting. Then came Special Agent Sarah Mitchell from the State Department's Diplomatic Security Service. She was all business, radiating authority. After hearing the details, she turned to Karen. "Mrs. Whitfield, do you realize that filing a false report is a criminal offense? And when it involves diplomats, it escalates to a federal level?" Karen's voice cracked. "I didn't know who they were. They looked suspicious. I was just trying to protect the community." Agent Mitchell's face didn't change. "Several witnesses heard your statements. You'll need to remain available for follow-up." Karen finally understood. This wasn't one of her HOA playground games. This was serious. And as the cruisers and federal vehicles lined the cul-de-sac, I stood quietly with my guests, ambassadors of goodwill and patience, watching Karen's little empire of control come crashing down. "You made several offensive remarks about their appearance and nationality, and even after being informed of their diplomatic status, you continued with baseless accusations. This went far beyond a simple misunderstanding." The next hour passed in a whirlwind of statements, phone calls, and official procedures. The ambassadors, maintaining their professionalism, stayed courteous throughout. Ambassador Al-Rashid even handed Karen a business card and gently suggested she visit Jordan one day to broaden her perspective. Karen looked at the card as if it were dangerous. Meanwhile, I handed over a detailed file to Agent Mitchell, including emails and records of Karen's ongoing harassment and her history of discriminatory behavior toward other neighbors. By late afternoon, the police had left, but the real damage, to Karen's reputation, was just beginning. Several neighbors had recorded the entire incident on their phones, and videos were already circulating through the community Facebook group. The responses were swift and harsh. Years of petty power trips had left Karen with few allies. By evening, news vans were parked along the street. The headline practically wrote itself: HOA President calls police on visiting ambassadors. On Sunday morning, the fallout continued. An emergency HOA board meeting was convened following overwhelming demand from residents for Karen's removal. She tried to justify her actions by claiming she was just being cautious, but board member Janet Torres shut her down. "You triggered an international incident. The mayor's office called me. The State Department got involved. You've put this whole community at risk of legal trouble," Janet said flatly. The board voted unanimously to remove Karen from her role as president, effective immediately. But things didn't end there. On Monday, Karen's employer, Preston Financial Services, released a public statement distancing itself from her actions. By noon, she was placed on administrative leave while the company conducted an internal review. The irony of the timing wasn't lost. Preston had recently launched a campaign centered on diversity and inclusion. Soon after, legal consequences followed. While the State Department chose not to press criminal charges, they referred the matter to the Department of Justice for potential civil rights violations. Karen received formal notice that she was under investigation for knowingly filing a false police report rooted in discriminatory bias. The potential fine started at $10,000. In addition, each ambassador's country filed official diplomatic complaints, paperwork that would haunt Karen indefinitely. Midweek brought an unexpected moment of warmth. The 4 ambassadors came by before their departure, bearing gifts from their homelands and handwritten letters thanking me for my kindness. Ambassador Mensah presented a handwoven Kent cloth. Ambassador Volov gifted a polished piece of Baltic amber. Ambassador Mendoza offered a book of Peruvian poetry. Ambassador Al-Rashid gave me a beautifully ornate tea set. But the most surprising gift was a letter from the State Department itself, thanking me for my help and inviting me to participate in future international exchange programs. Back in our neighborhood, the consequences kept unfolding. The city council passed a resolution formally denouncing Karen's actions. All HOA board members were now required to undergo cultural sensitivity training. On top of that, 3 more neighbors came forward with formal complaints about Karen's past discriminatory treatment. Her once beloved security camera system, once a tool for watching others, now worked against her, documenting her own pattern of harassment. On Friday, everything came to a head. Karen was served with a civil lawsuit filed by the diplomatic missions of the ambassadors. The suit accused her of defamation, harassment, and intentional infliction of emotional distress, demanding $100,000 in damages plus legal costs. With no income from her unpaid HOA position, Karen would have to pull from her savings, or consider selling her house. The same house she had used to monitor and control others had become her liability. While working in my home office that afternoon, I heard raised voices outside. Karen stood in her driveway, lawsuit papers in hand, yelling to no one in particular. "This isn't fair. I was just protecting the neighborhood," she cried. Her tiny poodle barked at her side, though even the dog seemed hesitant to get too close. Karen's fall from power was complete. The once untouchable head of the HOA had become its outcast. That evening, I sat on my back deck, sipping tea from Ambassador Al-Rashid's gifted set. The air in the neighborhood felt clearer, freer. A few neighbors stopped by to apologize for never speaking up before. Mrs. Rodriguez celebrated by hanging 3 new wind chimes, while the Johnsons placed 2 oversized garden gnomes in their yard, each slightly above the height Karen had once mandated. No words were needed. The quiet rebellion was over. By the end of the week, Karen had lost nearly everything. Her leadership role on the board, her job, or any realistic chance of keeping it, her good name, and her grip on control. She was under federal scrutiny, faced massive fines, and had a looming civil case that could wipe out her savings. The last time I saw her was at the grocery store. She stood at the self-checkout, eyes darting around nervously. When she saw me, she flushed with shame, abandoned her half-scanned items, and hurried out of the store. I caught a glimpse of her standing by her car, keys shaking in her hand, overwhelmed by the weight of what she had lost. The woman who once lorded over the neighborhood couldn't even shop for milk without embarrassment. In the end, she became a painful reminder of what happens when control turns into cruelty, when prejudice is given power, and karma finally arrives to settle the score.